NATO symbols. You see those little things all the time in some walks of life, in Western militaries, in wargaming, on military history maps, but understanding them can be a challenge, not least because of how many different types and variations there are. We draw heavily from the NATO system when we produce our maps that you've seen in the regular episodes, but we've also simplified them somewhat to make them accessible while preserving their essence. And today we're going to tell you how to read them. I'm Indy Neidell, and this is a Korean War special educational episode on our use of NATO symbology. Aren't all of our specials educational at some level, Sparty?
I think they are. I think that's sort of the idea. Actually.
Okay, well this is even more educational because it says education.
You know what this is? This
What?
is education about education.
Yeah, all right. Well, if you are a big fan of strategy gaming, you'll probably already be familiar with a fair amount of these symbols. The purpose of them, ultimately, is to create a standardized system of icons and symbols that every NATO military is familiar with. This makes working together on the battlefield easier. So whether you're a German panzer commander or a British infantryman or an American engineer, you're going to be able to tell what's what at a glance, whoever's map you're looking at. It's commonly believed that the first proper military map symbols emerged in the years following the Napoleonic Wars. But in actuality, some of the earliest maps we consider to be true military maps, bearing dedicated military symbology, come from the 2nd century BC from Han Dynasty, China. My chair makes noise. Oh well. Discovered in 1973, these maps, drawn on silk, contain information that we'd more associate with the modern era than the ancient past. The scale of these maps is fairly accurate, and they feature some basic topology like mountains, rivers, and hills, but they also feature military symbols, showing encampments alongside the name and rank of the local commander, supply bases, headquarters, and even watchtowers. In the West, we're talking mid-19th century before maps of similar detail really start to become commonplace. The maps we use today actually bear similarities to the Prussian game Kriegsspiel, literally war game in English. If you've played a tabletop war game which uses dice, rulers, terrain, and whatever to accurately recreate a combat situation, then you've played a derivative of Kriegsspiel. The game was designed to be as true to life as possible. A simulation more than entertainment, designed so budding commanders could sharpen their tactical understanding and try things out in a, shall we say, non-critical environment. The maps and tokens used in these games to represent units bear a striking similarity to the plucky little NATO symbols we all know and love today. Go look into it, it's really interesting. Anywho, different countries developed their own maps and symbology over this period, which were used throughout the world wars. But it wasn't until the formation of NATO in 1949 that the American version, developed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, began to be standardized and adopted by NATO militaries. So, let's have a look at one of them. This thing over my shoulder here is a NATO symbol. These pack a lot of information into a very small space, which is great for the kind of maps and screens on which they're going to appear. The shape of the symbol can also tell you at a glance whether you're looking at a friendly or hostile unit. Just so you know, today I'm talking only about ground units. Air units, naval units, submarines, they all have their own sets of symbols, which I'm not going to cover today, but go look them up. While I go through this, I'm also going to have my buddy Tom Aldis on hand from the Time Ghost Army Map Service to explain why we do things a little differently from the official NATO rules in our videos. So, ground units. A friendly unit is shown as a blue rectangle, a hostile one as a red diamond, a neutral one as a green square, and an unknown unit as a yellow quatrefoil clover. And I ate a lot of Lucky Charms cereal when I was a kid, so I would have used pink hearts, yellow moons, orange stars, and green clovers as my 4 basic ones if I was doing this, but apparently, well, Lucky Charms actually didn't exist till the 60s, so, these were designed first. Ooh, I wonder if they used NATO There's a hole we have to dig one day and find out.
That is one rabbit hole we need to go down into.
If anybody knows whether Lucky Charms ripped off NATO symbology for their cereal pieces, let us know in the comments, okay?
Hey guys. So, normally, as Indy says, a map using NATO symbols would be using diamonds for hostile units. This leads us to another limitation with the system, which is that a proper NATO map exists from one side's perspective. Your own units are friendlies and the other units are hostiles. Obviously this works on the battlefield, but not so much when you're making a documentary series, and impartiality is key. This is why we choose to represent all units the same way, that is, squares in the World War II series and rectangles here in Korea. As for the colours, anyone who's watched the World War II channel will know that we tend to use a flag of the unit's home nation rather than a colour scheme, and that's the same in Korea. It also works out quite nicely, because the UN forces would generally be associated with the colour blue, and communist forces tend to have somewhat of an affinity for red. So we can keep using that combination of colours that many will recognise. Convenient.
Generally speaking, on a proper NATO symbol, you're going to see the unit's designation on the left and their parent unit on the right. The little icon at the top of the symbol is very important too, though, the echelon. Echelons basically show you at a glance the rank of a unit within the hierarchy. The most common symbol you'll see on our maps is the double X, which is a division. A triple X is a corps, a single X is a brigade. See how this works. This goes all the way down to a single little pip, little round pip, which is a squad of 5 to 10 men. It's also important to remember that these are basically organizational pieces of machinery. They don't necessarily guarantee a force of a particular size. We've seen corps that contain a single division, and I've said several times in the regular episodes that a Chinese army is roughly the size of a UN corps. So why are those Chinese units shown as an army with the quadruple X rather than a corps? Because the purpose of these symbols is not to guess the rough strength of a unit, but to represent the command structure. The second division does not become the second brigade after you kill enough of its men. So it doesn't change on the map either. This also means that the symbology works on broad strategic maps and also very small local maps. At corps headquarters, they might show a regiment occupying a town. But then at that regimental headquarters, their maps are going to show the specific place of companies, platoons, even squads within that town. And an experienced officer is going to be able to look at the maps side by side and know exactly what is going on in both.
The challenge with making maps for our series is providing information without clutter. They need to be easily digestible, intuitive, yet not sacrifice important details. And this is why you typically see units on our map represented at the division level. Regiments and battalions pop up when we're talking about them, but trying to track dozens more units from week to week is not only much harder to accurately research and animate, but can be unsightly and confusing for you guys. For the Chinese and especially the North Koreans, detailed, reliable information available to us can be scarce, and often we're limited to representing them at corps or army level commands. You'll also see that while we retain the echelon and the unit number or name, we tend to omit the parent unit. Partly this is just about maintaining clarity and eliminating clutter, but it's also an aesthetic choice. In almost all cases, it's apparent what corps or division belongs to, because Indy will either tell us directly, or the proximity of the corps HQ will give it away. In Korea especially, it simply makes more sense to do it this way. Oh, and hey, let's mention source material for a moment. There's 2 books in our source list which Indy and I have both used extensively and are absolutely outstanding for maps. These are Roy Appelman's South to the Naktong, North to the Yalu, and Billy Mossman's Ebb and Flow. You may have seen these books pop up for quotes here and there, but here's something you may not know. All the maps from these books are available online on koreanwar.org. Link is in the pinned comment. All that's left to talk about now is the unit identifiers. So, Indy, take it away.
Let's talk about unit identifiers, or icons. These things occupy the unit frame and tell you what the unit is. The one you're going to see most often, both in our videos and on real military maps, is infantry, represented here as an X shape through the unit. It's thought that this shape is reminiscent of the bandoliers worn by infantry in the Napoleonic era. For cavalry, you have a single diagonal line from bottom left to top right, like a sash or a strap. Artillery, cannonball. Tanks, you've got an oval representing tank treads. Then you can start to combine them. Take the symbol for tanks and overlay it with the symbol for infantry, and boom, mechanized infantry. There are dozens of different symbols and hundreds of combinations, but this all adds up to a system where you can look at a tiny icon and a few numbers on a map and tell what type of unit it is, whether it's friendly or hostile, whether it's a division, regiment, or smaller, and what unit it belongs to. So, you know what makes up a NATO symbol, and you know why our symbols are a little different from the standard. Go forth, armed with this knowledge, and stare at those little maps on articles about battles for far, far too long to the detriment of your sleep, as I have done far, far too many nights in my life. And join the Time Ghost Army for more fun little specials like this one. That is what keeps us running. You can do that at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. See you next time.